So, we've finally reached the end of our journey into J.R. Bookwalter's early career and the SOV six-pack. And, well, when I say that this is the film that pretty much broke the camel's back, I'm really not kidding. Because what we have here is probably one of the most insane turnarounds on a movie that I've read about in a long time. Now, that doesn't particularly bode well for the results, but, well, this isn't exactly a series that's been reliant on high-quality mainstream-level production values. So after the runaround that was Galaxy of the Dinosaurs, J.R. Bookwalter was in a spot of trouble. The due date for both movies was March 1992, and they were now in March 1992, with only one film completed and another developed no further than a title. So, with a pep in his step and no time to lose, JR began work on the script for Film 6, 1992's Humanoids of Atlantis. And within a few days, he'd got a story that was punchy and power-packed. The film was supposed to act as a kind of finale to the SOV experiment, and would have been set in the fictional town of Tempeville, twinned with Tromaville clearly, and would have seen several characters from JR's previous movies returning cameos to help our main cast take on an army of reptilian monsters from Atlantis who'd taken up residence in the town's local lake. These would have included the Sheriff from Kingdom of the Vampires, Doctor of Death from Zombie Cop, and various characters from Robot Ninja, Chickboxer and Maximum Impact. Consider it, if you will, an Avengers-type scenario, with all of these weird and bizarre heroes and villains putting aside their differences to either find peace with the Atlanteans or die trying. It sounded awesome. But then, the problems started. First, a series of extreme weather changes hit Ohio throughout most of the production block, including a freak storm and several blizzards that dropped temperatures regularly down to -7 degrees Celsius. As a result, a majority of the outdoor sequences had to either be dropped or rewritten to become indoor sequences. Equally, there was a significant proportion of the second and third acts that were to feature in-water and underwater fighting scenes. These too had to be removed after all of the cast refused to get into a freezing lake and roll around for an hour or two in the middle of a blizzard. These changes were significant problems when your film is predominantly about an underwater race of monsters taking on land dwellers, meaning that the big grand finale more or less had to be scrapped too. Then, most of the actors who were set to cameo turned down the role or were unavailable at the time to appear as their previous characters. So the Avengers-style team-up aspect had to be more or less dropped entirely too, with some lines being recycled to our main cast and, rather bizarrely, the Sheriff from Kingdom of the Vampires being recast for a very small cameo that no one, including myself, realised was a cameo until I was told such in the extra features after the fact. This resulted in large scenes from the final fight sequence being dropped entirely. And finally, there was the budgetary constraints. This film was made on a budget of between $1,250 and $1,500, the majority of which was spent on tape stock. So not only was the script now in tatters, but they didn't even really have the budget to try and work themselves out of the situation. They were pretty much dead in the water, no pun intended. Okay, maybe just a little pun intended. But, rather than throw in the towel, JR does what JR does best, and he powered on in a frankly absurd way. First, he literally cannibalised the first and second acts of the script down to their absolute barest elements. Where there were plot holes, he'd ask them to improvise scenes at specific locations to fill in the gaps. Then, the ending and the third act got the same treatment, only this time, instead of the apocalyptic final lake battle for the finale, they decided to go meta and end the movie, and spoilers from here on out, by revealing that the events in this film were in fact sets and locations being filmed for a film. Yes, this movie is actually a movie inside a movie. And the film literally ends with the editors taking the finished film to the premiere, which, I mean, it's not the greatest ending in the world, but given that they didn't have an end, I guess they do now. In total, the original script was supposed to run for around 90-ish minutes. No doubt that would have probably been cut down as filming went along to somewhere around the 70 to 80-ish minute mark. But after all the cuts, rewrites and other fuckery that went into this script, the final product is a film that runs to just shy of 48 minutes. And 14 minutes of that 48-minute runtime are just titles and credits. The finished film's plot follows our two main characters, Ken and Julie, a loving couple who are having a bit of a rough time. Ken's a film enthusiast and works in the industry, but he isn't getting that much work and has had to live from hand to mouth for a while now, much to Julie's frustration. But Ken gets a big break when he's assigned a paid gig to shoot a documentary at the town's local lake. Everything's looking positive, but things are about to derail quite quickly for the couple, as we then cut to a doctor who's recently made the discovery of the century. A creature like nothing ever seen before has washed up on the shores, presumed dead, and she's been slowly analysing and studying the creature in order to present it to the scientific community as a new life. However, unfortunately for her, the creature is far from dead and suddenly comes back to life and flees to the lakes that Ken and Julie are filming at. And after scaring some stoners, it eventually finds Ken and Julie, who document it using the camera equipment before fleeing after it begins to attack them. There's then a random bit of tension where the pair argue about the failed shoot and they go their separate ways and stay in separate houses. But Julie decides to do something with the footage and contacts the doctor, who's just been literally driving around the neighbourhoods looking for the underwater menace. Eventually, Ken and Julie reconcile and head to the doctor's house to find out exactly what's been going on, and she informs them that they need to recapture the creature ASAP, as it lives on a mixture of salt water and toxic waste, and if they don't recover it within 24 hours, it'll die for real. They also find out that the creature is defensive by nature, that it'll only attack if it feels like it's going to be attacked first. But before the gang can even head out to go and find the Atlantean, it randomly turns up in the doctor's office. As in, it literally just teleports in. No one hears it enter the house, 1 second it's not there, then it is. And from here on in, the end of the movie plays out. Our characters fight with the creature, run around for a bit, and eventually barricade themselves in a house where they find a notebook that reveals that the doctor's a baddie. Not that that really even matters, because shortly after that reveal, the creature has a final fight with Ken that then just stops. And the whole thing is revealed to be a movie within a movie. And that's the film. Cue over 8 minutes of end credits for a film that top end has about 15 people involved in it within the entire cast and crew. This is a first for the channel, but I can't really talk about the script because there isn't one. What's presented here are a handful of pages from a rejected script married up to an almost totally improvised on the day setup. This is also a first in the sense that I can't really call this a feature. This is a short. Without the titles or credits, this thing doesn't even break 35 minutes. And as such, the definitions and boundaries around act structures and pacing, well, they do still apply, but nowhere near as much. What I can say about this one is that for a piece of work that was shot pretty much on the fly for a budget of less than $1.5K in freezing and unworkable filming locations, this somehow has come out better than Galaxy of the Dinosaurs and Chick Boxer. Like, I think I'd rather watch this movie over those two films. It's fast-paced, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and has a first act that's pretty much entirely spoken rather than shown, but it's fun. This is a somewhat entertaining short film, and if you go into it bearing in mind that this is a low, no-budget production shot in wintry conditions, largely improvised and produced with an unreal deadline, I think you'll come away somewhat surprised. Oh yeah, I can't let that one escape me. The film's production schedule from script to video store is insane. So the script took a few days to write and a few days to put in the bin, that's by the by. What is crazy though is that this film began filming on the 7th of March 1992 and was in video stores by the 18th of March. That's 11 days. 11 days to shoot a nearly fully improvised script, reshoot shots that didn't work, edit, master, dub, soundtrack score, create the box art, and ship the movie. I know parcels that have taken longer to arrive than that. For a reference point to those of you who haven't worked in film before, 11 days isn't even enough time to start pre-production on a mainstream film, let alone to go from nothing to it's in stores now. And that's including at least a couple of incidents on this set where actors were no-shows and they had to drag in crew members to fill out the roles. Like the Doctor character in this movie, she was dragged in on the day to this role because the original actress for the part bailed on the day and they didn't have time to recast. What you're seeing with this film is pure ingenuity and impulse filmmaking. And while the end result is a movie that some people claim is the worst ever made, I can only wholeheartedly disagree. Not only is this not the worst film ever made, but I am in awe that this thing even got off the ground. The direction is militant, but what do you expect really? What I will say is that this does have a bit more flourish in it than Galaxy of the Dinosaurs, in the sense that there are some moments where this starts to feel like a J.R. Bookwalter film again. There's a couple of shots that use coloured lighting gels, there's a sense of personality in some of the sequences based on how the cast are framed and how the camera moves around the locations. It's not much, but it's enough that it didn't go unnoticed. This is functional filmmaking once again. It won't win any awards, but it's decent enough that it easily pushes this into the upper third of the films I've covered as part of this run. Same goes for the cine too, really. The sequences are reasonably well handled, with enough shot variations used throughout to help keep scenes running smoothly with a more than reasonable use of composition for the majority of the shots. Yeah, there are some utterly shocking shots in this film, and I definitely wouldn't say this film was pretty. But again, given the hurdles this had to clear, the budget, and the general feeling of utter despair and depression that surrounded the cast and crew on this film, I think I can say quite confidently that this thing visually came out a lot better than it should have. The performances aren't the best in the world. In fact, they're pretty awful. And I know I've parroted on multiple times about how this was a difficult production and that they were making the best of a bad situation, but the acting in this film puts me in a bit of a catch-22, because at least 2 or 3 of the 5 or 6 people involved in this film weren't actors. They were dragged in on the day, last minute, and were told to read lines that had been written for them off a script that was being held up just behind the camera. So yeah, these performances are dire for the most part. Even taking the non-actors out of the equation, the actual real proper actors in this movie are pretty awful too. But it very much was a case of everyone was miserable, they just wanted the thing done, and for the non-actors, this was the first time they'd ever been on screen, and none of them claimed to be actors in the first place. They were just trying to help out. So yeah, it's bad, but I hope you can appreciate why. Finally, the soundtrack. And it's a bit of a step up again in quality. The score for this one's pretty nice. It's been a running theme through all of my Bookwalter reviews, but the scores in his movies are usually really quite solid, and in some cases probably the best thing about the movies. And here it's got a really rocky, upbeat, pumping electronic vibe that I really dug. It was enjoyable enough that I'm actually really glad that the SOV 6-pack set contains CDs of all of these scores, and I'd love to give them a spin outside of the movies sometime. So yeah, another big thumbs up from me. Humanoids of Atlantis was released on VHS on the 18th of March 1992 by Cinema Home Video. And from what I can find, it didn't get another release until it was put out in a rift form in the early 2000s as part of the Bad Movie Cops series. It finally got a full unriffed Blu-ray release in 2020 from Makeflix in the SOV 6-pack set. And honestly, this is one of those cases where the extras are more interesting than the movie. The main point of interest being a full cast read-through of the original binned script, with most, if not all, of the original cast members who were supposed to be involved. Which makes for a fascinating compare and contrast between what is and what could have been. There's also 2 making-of features, 3 commentaries, trailers, promo material, all that good stuff. And I find it really quite amazing that a film like this has such a comprehensive set of extras to flesh it out. It's really kind of crazy. Humanoids of Atlantis isn't the worst movie ever made. In fact, it's actually quite a silly watch that I thought was quite a good bit of fun. Not something you could necessarily watch again and again, but something that would act as a nice middle film in a B-movie triple feature, or one to surprise people with at a watch party. While none of this is by any means perfect, it has acceptable cine and direction, a nice score, so bad it's entertaining performances, and given how little of this film's script is actually script, the improv stuff isn't overly cringy and did make me laugh a few times. That being said, this is definitely not a film to actively try and hunt down. It's really not worth that much effort. But if you do stumble across it, it's 35 minutes of just a weird and silly little movie that I think does get a lot worse of a rap than it probably deserves. I really think like I've been on a journey this month covering these films. I know the set is called the SOV Six-Pack, but realistically there is a seventh story in this set. One about a director who returned to his home city and decided to try and make a go of the SOV filmmaking scene, only to find himself slowly crushed by deadlines and abandoned by most of the cast and crew he worked with because of the insane crush that these movies presented. This set is kinda like a snapshot into the life of J.R. Bookwalter between 1991 and 1992. And between the films, the making-ofs, the booklet that accompanies the set and the commentaries, it really paints a picture of a man who desperately tried to keep his hand in the industry over something he's clearly very passionate about, and just how ruthless and willing to manipulate people that industry was in the venture of what ultimately mustn't have been that big of a gain. I'd say that this set is essential watching to anyone who wants to become an aspiring filmmaker, as a lot of the rules and lessons that this set teaches really aren't all that different from what is the case today. And a life lesson I always try to promote is that you can learn almost as much on how to make a movie from bad films as you can from good ones. These films nearly broke J.R. Bookwalter. After production finished on Humanoids, within days of the edit being locked, producer David Dakota attempted to pitch another 2 movies to Bookwalter on an even further reduced budget. These were supposed to be a blaxploitation film and a western. Bookwalter refused point blank and went into a bit of a depression for a time, where he considered leaving the film industry altogether. Luckily, he eventually came out of that fog, and using the equipment he purchased to make the Six-Pack and having made amends with some of the cast and crew from his experiment, he began work on the comeback project Ozone. He was able to take his time on the project, to get the script together, to hire a proper cast, and to actually make a movie how you're supposed to make a movie, with time, patience and actual love for the project. The Six-Pack experiment nearly killed Bookwalter's enthusiasm for the genre, but Ozone reignited his passion for filmmaking, so this story does kind of have a happy ending. And I'm really glad he continued to make movies right up to the early 2000s, because while my reviews of these films individually have been a bit lumpy to say the least, I think on the whole, Bookwalter is a frankly astounding director. A really, truly talented director and editor who can just make things work come hell or high water. And that's the exact quality you need in any director worth his salt. Someone who can just adapt to situations as they happen. He's a talented editor, and he seems to have a good sense of humour about himself, and I really sincerely hope he gets the chance, if he wants to make another movie, as I'd more than happily check it out. Alright, I think we're about done here, but in closing, my favourite film from this venture was probably Robot Ninja, which I genuinely think needs to be seen by way more people. Seriously, it's a blast. And Zombie Cop, which, despite its serious faults, is ultimately an entertaining and quite well-made watch that I think is probably the most technically proficient SOV film I've seen to date. Is the SOV Six-Pack worth picking up? Well, I got it on discount during the last Black Friday sale for $43, and I think it's probably just about worth that. That's like $6 or $7 a feature, plus a raft of extra features, soundtracks, and full downloads for all of them. Plus Makeflix's 10-year MOD guarantee that means if any of your discs get damaged over the next 10 years, they'll replace them no questions asked. And from experience, they actually mean that. Now that's going above and beyond on the customer services front, and it really sets them apart as a company that I would be more than happy to support in the future where I can. At the minute, however, it's currently retailing for $80, which, if I'm being honest, it just isn't worth that to me. I have to be honest here, it's a fantastic set, but to me that seems a little bit excessive. So my advice to you, if you're a fan of SOV movies and you've seen some of Bookwalter's films before, or you've watched these reviews and think that these might be the kind of films for you, keep an eye on Makeflix's site, as this pack may well get discounted again. That being said, these are also limited edition, and at the time of writing there's about a dozen or so copies left, so it may even be the case that by the time that this review goes live, they're gone. Though they usually do offer downloads of the movies they sell after a time, so it may well be the case that these films end up on a reasonably priced VOD platform near you in the near future. Either way, I've included a link to Makeflix's site in the description of all of these reviews, and I do recommend you go and check them out, as they've got some fantastic stuff going on over there. For now though, we're going to close the book on Bookwalter, and starting next week, well, we're going to be tackling a classic.